Hey there, internets. So doing a very late game, recording this very late at least. So it won't actually probably be visible to many people until morning by the time they get up and see it. But this week we're going to talk about the case 303 web design, I believe it is, versus Colorado. It's the case talking about the web designer who wanted to make websites for the but wanted to make wedding websites, but didn't want to make them for gay marriage websites because she considered those to be fake. It came out on her side. I've heard some people say there's fake facts. It sounds to me like there was a second filing that they referenced. In the end, I read all 70 pages of syllabus and the opinion of the court and the dissent by Justice Sotomayor. And I screenshot and retyped into some notes here a quote at the end of Justice Gorsuch's opinion, where he says, "But tolerance, not coercion, is our nation's power." Tolerance but coercion is our nation's answer. The First Amendment envisions the United States as a rich and complex place where all persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands. Because Colorado seeks to deny that promise, the judgment is, and they have this big space, I don't know if that's formatting, but reversed. So it wasn't intended, I don't think, to make it a big pause, some dramatic thing. But that's the outline of the case is, does a Christian web designer, if she's going to offer for profit to design websites for people who are getting married, can she say, look, I'm only going to do ones for straight couples? And understand, she's willing to design websites for a person's personal web page, websites if they're gay, their business, possibly their political ideas. She is not willing even to do for straight people certain websites with messages about promoting violence and other such things, or other views she finds to be unbiblical. Doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. That's what she is being even handed. But so she is saying the message itself. Colorado said it's incidental, you have to do it because you're a business. And she's saying this is going to be enforced on me proactively. This is similar to where the gun shops are suing the state of Washington because of its assault weapons ban and its magazine ban. And they say, if we sell these things, we're going to be in legal hot water. We need to stop. We want to challenge this before we're in legal hot water. And so I read out both opinions. And I do agree with Justice Gorsuch as it is superior. And in fairness to Justice Sotomayor, she does, if you only read her opinion by itself, you don't have Gorsuch's up against it, hers is the superior. Justice Gorsuch's opinion, it centers only on First Amendment speech claims. It does not get into issues of religious freedom or possibly non-discrimination towards people wanting to do these kind of businesses. And I'll get to that later in the video here. He does note, though, some of the things. He goes through several things where this isn't new, where someone said, I want to control my message, whether it was but in previous cases, it was a veterans group saying we want to exclude this other group, or the Boy Scouts saying we're not going to have this, we don't want to allow a gay scoutmaster, some similar things. Now, Sotomayor does point out that in some cases they were wanting to be in the veterans parade with not because they weren't rejected just for being gay, it was that they were going to carry a banner supporting their political agenda. And that is of note. But especially for religious people, whether you're Christian or not, and I'm going to use religious and Christian probably interchangeably out of habit, but understand this would apply to Jews, Muslims, pagans, Mormons, whatever. If you are religious, everything you do says something. If you're following your religion, if you're advocating for certain ideas, or if you do business with people that advocate ideas you don't like, possibly, that sends a message. And to make websites for profit for gay weddings sends the message that you are approving of that. Not unlike where someone found themselves torn between being supportive of a friend and then their Christian faith, and the friend had same-sex attractions, was going to marry somebody of the same sex, and felt like they were torn between, do I be supportive of a friend, or do I follow my religion and not show approval? It's not so simple as that. But he said speech cannot be limited because of the speaker's motivation, even if it is paid speech. If you're making websites and you say, hey, I don't do websites for progressives because I will not engage in that, that would be the same thing. Siding with the state would mean her not being able to refuse messages. And that for her, that is doing that, saying, I will not put your views up. They specifically say in the ruling, this is where they get into this thing of, no, it is not Jim Crow coming back. You're not going to have divided lunch counters again because of this ruling. It specifically says it's not licensed to discriminate wholesale, because not everything could possibly be, while an innumerable number of things could be speech, not everything is. It does not address religious freedom issues. And I'll talk about that in a bit, and all the parties to this, Gorsuch points out that they are only talking about pure speech. It is merely the motivation. State of Colorado says, because you're offering it as a business, you have to accept it. All speech, even speech you don't like. Now, if she probably would have lost this case if she said, I'm not serving gay people. If she had said that, it probably wouldn't have flown. When she said, I will not make this message. And I think this is where you get into, could you charge somebody with discrimination for if you were selling supplies for weddings and you did not carry anything for same-sex marriage wedding situations or ceremonies, and they came in and said, can you order, and you just simply refused to order it. You said, you can buy anything in here. I'm not ordering stuff special. I don't know. These are all unresolved issues. Sotomayor's dissent, again, last year I kind of slammed Breyer for ignoring chunks of what Clarence Thomas talks about. Sotomayor clearly doesn't understand that a lot of the things you do are speech, in that if speech can be limited, she incorrectly, number one, claims that it's going to create a wholesale license to discriminate, and that is not the case in the finding. She concentrates throughout treating the right to not be discriminated against as unlimited, while speech should be limited, or speech could be. Her proposed remedy would be to say, oh, well, you could always put a quote just saying, a man shall leave his mother and his father's house and cleave to his wife. Or you could put things on your every website as though every website's going to be cookie cutter and just off the shelf. And, put a little thing in there, put it up in the corner saying man plus woman equals marriage. Do offensive things that some Christians have proposed doing to drive business away. effectively being a bigger a-hole than you would be just simply refusing it. And her argument relies purely on federal laws and state laws demanding non-discrimination without citing a particular part of the Constitution. Now, when I get in here to the Constitution, it says in the amendments, the First Amendment, which is the most relevant one here, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This is where we get into the religious issues around it. Or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, or to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So to tell somebody you have to speak for somebody paid because of some sort of protected characteristic doesn't sit there, but free exercise thereof, part of religion. That's everything you do if you're religious. It doesn't matter what your religion is. I have a couple of very close pagan friends. Their religion has very few rules, but they still have a right to express it. Sotomayor very much seems to think that that right to speak could be eliminated much more. And then you get into so you may say, okay, what constitutional provision would support Sotomayor? Well, the only things I can find is you go to the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's kind of your limiting factor. The 9th Amendment was the one I was thinking of. The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And then the 14th Amendment, I think it is. The 15th Amendment. That's why I have a pocket constitution. It says the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Where is the one I am thinking of? 14th Amendment, that is it. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So under the First Amendment, you have potentially two enumerated rights, speech and religion, and in the First Amendment referred with association, because that is considered a form of speech who you associate with, all enumerated. In the 9th Amendment, you could argue that there is an unenumerated right to not be discriminated against based on laws that have been passed at different times. And Sotomayor does reference those. So you have you effectively have one right possibly competing with others. She also talks about how, no one makes them go have a business. They don't have to have a business. They don't have to go into business and offer their services. Here's the problem with that. If you are religious and you are now told you can service weddings that you find to be objectionable and sinful and have a business, or you can have no business and follow God, you have effectively discriminated against Christians or other religious people in the same manner that you are accusing others of discrimination. So now you have two enumerated rights and one or two unenumerated rights compared to one enumerated right. And so you have this issue of where do you split competing rights when you have that. Rights in the United States it's not like Canada where everything has a little asterisk by it. Your rights are supposed to be pretty much unlimited unless there's reason to limit it, like two rights bump up against each other from two people. You get the purely religious freedom issues of if you are religious, you can't, it's everything you do. That's something that liberal Democrats do not understand. They think that your religion stops at the front door of the church or the synagogue or the mosque, or when you're outside of your outdoor altar area if you're pagan, whatever it is. So how do you do this? This is one of those unresolved issues that we have to say, where do you hammer that? Well, I would suggest that the rights that are burdened the greatest, in fact, are the ones that must win out. And I've said this several places, social media and comments the last few weeks. And it reminds me of some of this argument from the left of you don't have the right to discriminate. You don't have the right to discriminate. You don't have the right to discriminate. Sotomayor kind of parroted that, even though she tried to lay out a better argument of the why, of basically saying we have a long history of saying you can't do that even when you make these other arguments. And I remember a young woman, it's my understanding she eventually came out, but I'm not going to use her name. She was another student of my instructor, and we were chatting about something, and I mentioned about how I didn't understand why people would join like the Catholic Church, which is very hierarchical, very rigid, and then somehow think that the Catholic Church is going to change to them. And I feel that way about any religion. And then it drifted to the issue of things like gay marriage. All she could do was say, you don't have the right to discriminate. You don't have the right to discriminate. All she could do is claim the right. I asked her, but why does that override my religious freedom? Why does that override my freedom of speech? And she could not say why. So you have two rights butting up against each other. I can name at least two rights that are burdened versus one, for starters. For second, what would be the remedies? If you're being discriminated against, take your business elsewhere. That would be one. Another would be what is in Gorsuch says that no non-discrimination law can stand against the Constitution, against the First Amendment. Okay. And I tend to agree with that. So where does one begin, one end? And they say this is in public accommodations. Well, if you're a business, what is not a public accommodation? That's a question you might ask. What is not a public accommodation? But still be for profit. It treats your free speech as ending the minute you want to have a business. And again, if you are religious, you are not allowed to have a business if you're going to have to choose between following your God or gods or having a business. That is literally another form of discrimination. And, the people that were the bad guys in World War II, they did that. They barred Jewish people from being able to be doctors, being able to be lawyers, being able to work for the government. So think about that for a minute, where that can go. So but the Supreme Court may have given us a clue where they could go with this. And this is in Gorsuch's opinion. And this is important, I think, where we can start drawing these lines. They talk about expressive and businesses, custom work, that sort of thing. Maybe that's where we have to draw that line. When you go into custom work. So when you go into the lunch counter and you say, and there's a menu, that's not custom work. if somebody's coming off-site to your private party, that's not custom. That's custom work. If you're hiring a caterer, if you're hiring and they say, I don't want your private catering business, where you have to go off-site to you. Hiring a photographer. I'm sorry, but a photographer is an expressive business. When my wife and I were getting married, I found on short notice a photographer. I don't know what she would think of my politics, but she came in, she did the photos, and she did some that were intended to be artistic, and some we liked better than others afterward, but that was just, her trying to create various pictures that caught the day and ideas to it. But that was an artistic endeavor. Not just a randomly open to the public. And you might have, in some of these you might have to get specific. If you offer things that are very gender neutral, or that should be, if you have a studio, maybe you have to say, we have to draw where in a service like that is custom, which is not. Private, intimate surroundings. For people that are trans, should a woman have to give a man pretending to be a woman a Brazilian? That's become an issue because we've had trans women go into spas and say, I want a Brazilian wax, and they still have their male parts. All of these are issues that surround that. So someone doing a custom website, that isn't just randomly off the street public. Going into a store and buying stationery, it's pretty standard. Sorry, you can't borrow them from being in there and picking up your product. We're going to have to figure out where the line is between open to the public businesses and not, because I can't think of very many businesses that aren't available to whoever the government, obviously if you're a defense contractor, you're going to run into the government allowing you to sell weapons to somebody. So where is that line? That's a line we're going to have to figure it out in order to be able to accommodate people's religion and their freedom to speak versus that non-discrimination. I remember seeing recently a meme that says, hey, conservatives, you got a problem with these two lesbians? And there was two women, probably gun bunnies, probably weren't even lesbians. But, two women, fully clothed, but with weapons. And I'm like, no, they have Second Amendment rights. But maybe someone says, I don't want to do custom engraving with the message you want on that weapon, ma'am. You and your wife have a nice day. Maybe that's what we have to do. But that's kind of what's in that thing is Sotomayor treats a right to not be discriminated against as inviolate, and you cannot, and overrides everything, whereas freedom of the First Amendment apparently can be severely limited the minute you want to be outside of a very narrow area of political speech or inside your church. And that is completely wrong on its face. So, in my view, this was the right decision. It's taking it the right recent ways. I just wish they would have addressed some of the religious freedom issues, but that was not where that went. So until then, like, share, subscribe, ring that little bell for notifications. If you already are a subscriber, maybe you'll catch that the videos are up. And until then, you all take care.